Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk 9527. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we're with Punk 5305 with 3 Atties, messy hair, handlebars, and classic shades. In real life, he's a builder and Ethereum Maxi, founding a super useful product I use called Earni-Fi, which basically alerts you to airdrops of any eligible wallets you might have. He also serves as the Chief Technology Officer of BanklessLabs, which is part of the wonderful Bankless podcast that most crypto natives tune into each week. Please welcome Dawson Botsford, or Daws, to the show. Daws, how are you, man?
So good, Max. Thanks for having me on. That was an impressive intro.
Thanks, man. Jeez, what a morning. Just trying to get all the things moving. But thanks so much for joining us. Where are you dialing in from today?
I'm chatting with you from the sunny Boise, Idaho.
Nice. How's everything all going for you lately?
Things have been pretty busy, actually. A ton's happening in Bankless. I feel like bear markets are really when the builders come out of hiding. There's actually a lot of time to build, and so it's kind of day and night trying to predict what's going to lead the next run up here and prepare technology to support that.
Yeah, I'd love to sort of get into some of that with you as well. And I think you're right. It just probably gives people a little bit of an opportunity to stop and think a little bit more. Yeah, it's been a wild ride in the last couple of weeks too. But hopefully you're not down bad like the rest of us.
I am hanging in there. How about yourself? How are your bags feeling right now?
Look, they're bleeding. They're absolutely bleeding. But yeah, I think that's part of the game we're in, right? So all good. But Daws, why don't you kick us off with a bit of an introduction to yourself and how you got into the wonderful world of Web3.
Yeah, sure thing, Max. So I am a dev first. As you mentioned in the intro, I am currently serving as CTO over at BanklessLabs, but I wasn't always interested in kind of doing more vision and leadership. In fact, I'm the hacker who loves to stay up late writing software. So even to this day, I still write software majority of my time. Always slaying code. So for me, software has actually always been the area I go nuts for. I go crazy for. I mean, I got really interested in it when I was in middle school with calculator games. I helped a bunch of my classmates cheat on some math tests with calculator like programs, and just kind of always had that lean of a bit of a counterculture application of this skill set. And I think punks and Ethereum both go really in line with that as well.
That's super cool. So maybe you can take us a little bit deeper into that. I mean, were you always, naturally gifted in coding technology growing up? And where did you sort of study and how did you sort of arrive at coding as your profession?
Yeah, so my official background is definitely in the line of computer science. I got my undergraduate degree in computer science, University of Colorado. But really where I got my knowledge and passion from was not even from school. That's kind of just like background noise. And it made for the introductions to friends, and it made for the introductions to the startup world. But really where I got my start and my passion for software came from hackathons. So when I saw the startup scene really leaning into this thing called a hackathon, I immediately got interested. I mean, it sounds competitive, intense, cool, like creative, and that's totally what I found my knack for. In fact, I almost dropped out of computer science my sophomore year of college because I was so uninterested in the classes. The teachers really found a way to make it boring, and so that was a challenge for me to get through college studying computer science, even though I'm like the epitome of the stereotype of the type of person who would thrive at this as a career. But college almost shook it out of me. And so it wasn't until I was building stuff for fun on the weekends and the nights that then it clicked for me. And I realized, oh, you can actually go make things that people care about right now with a skill set, when I thought I would have to spend years and years learning all the boring CS concepts, all the math, all the calculus. But luckily I did solve it in time for before dropping out. to continue. And yeah, I did graduate with my undergraduate degree.
For the normies like me, what exactly goes on in a hackathon?
Yeah, so it's actually a really misleading name. The name hackathon, I wish I could rebrand. And if I were to rebrand it, I would call it an invention marathon. The reason I think invention marathon is more accurate is because there's no hacking. It's not a security thing. It's not a penetration test. It's not a bunch of people wearing, robber masks breaking into anything. So a hackathon, think about it like this. So you've got a weekend, and in this weekend, you're going to go build the thing you've always wanted. Everyone's heard like around the table, around holidays, you're talking to your family, and you're like, there really should be an app for blank, whatever your thing is. There should be an app for that. There should be a website. There should be an app on your phone. That's exactly what you go build during a hackathon. And so these Ethereum focused hackathons allow you to go build the idea you've always had that relates to Web3. And that's where I really found my click, my niche. And I try to go to pretty much every ETH Global hackathon. And they do them all around the world, and they're usually weekend events.
Were you straight up into Web3 or were you sort of a Web2 first?
Yeah, a bit of both. In fact, so I heard about Ethereum at the initial launch. So I was into Bitcoin before Ethereum existed, and then got out of the scene, actually. So when Ethereum came along, I knew that it was something interesting and exciting, but in fact, it didn't make sense to me yet. So in 2015, I actually helped contribute to the website, the Ethereum website. I fixed a few grammar mistakes. You can see it back on GitHub, and then promptly stepped away from the scene. In fact, I didn't know what to do. I didn't think it was really ready for someone like me who, I don't work at the really low level of this stuff. I don't work on Ethereum core. I build websites on top. I build applications on top and UIs. And so I really didn't see a fit for myself yet at the time.
So maybe you just before we get into the Web3, what kinds of things? Do you recollect about building in the Web2 world that you were proud of?
The thing I'm most proud of was getting a job in Web 2. So I got a job at Uber out of graduation. And that was probably what I'm most proud of. It's a very competitive time period. This was before IPO, when Uber's still startup stage. And yeah, back then it was kind of like a cool kid thing to do. It was like go to Uber, Airbnb, or a couple of those style of companies. They all started around 2012. They all were getting big quick, and it was just like the Web 2 dream was like go live in San Francisco and work at one of those Web 2 companies. And although I didn't last very long, like I didn't thrive and enjoy it, I thought that my time at Uber was really critical for seeing my whole career because I understood just like how much of an impact you can have in software, but also what you choose to do with the skill set really matters. And ultimately, I found getting taxis to be something helpful and relevant to the world, but not for me. That's someone else's calling, and it's not my calling.
Well, it was definitely a disruptive product when it came out, right? And I think you joined some pretty high caliber people that came out of the Uber sort of ranks. But also, I think fellow punk NFT Stats was also ex Uber as well. Not sure if you're familiar with him. Cool. And then talk to us a little bit about how you stumbled into crypto and Bitcoin. I think you sort of mentioned that sort of journey. When was that, and how was that sort of process for you?
So when I first heard about crypto, it was through some folks who were pretty into Silk Road. So this was really early days in Bitcoin, and for me at the time, I was very straight edge, and I didn't understand what to do with Bitcoin besides hold it. And it wasn't for many years that we would come up with smart contracts and programmable money. And so I did a little bit of what I could with Bitcoin at first. This is in 2014. I was attempting to kind of be a quant, like a high frequency trader. I was writing these scripts to like buy and sell. It might sound super giga brain, but it's really not. Like what I'm describing was sometimes 5 or 10 line scripts, like 5 or 10 lines of code. It would just maybe get the current price, put in a take like above and below. And so that was how I started with Bitcoin. But as I mentioned, I really didn't understand what to do with this whole world and stepped out of it. And so it's actually pretty similar to my punk story, which is that I saw it initially, like pretty early, realized it wasn't for me at the time, disappeared, regretted it. So I really regretted being outside of crypto during the 2017 bull run. In fact, I held quite a bit of Bitcoin. I think I held 10 or 11 Bitcoin when I was just a broke college kid. Back then, that was like $2,000. and promptly sold all of it when it doubled. And so, I'm a type A person, very granular. And so I made sure I sold 100% of it. And I really wish I had been a bit lazier. I wish I had lost track of certain accounts because I still have the old cell phone from 10 years ago over here now that 0.0001 Bitcoin or something. It's like, I really did round. I really did round well and like drain those wallets. So all that to say, if it doesn't click for you right away, I think like the moral is to just give it time and see if it will later on. And so, I mean, we can connect this to the Punk story, but basically, I got back into Ethereum full force, all effort, everything I could in 2020.
So you got in super early in 2014. You stayed out of the 2017 bull, and then you came back pretty heavy in 2020. What was it that brought you back in?
Yeah. So, in fact, what was really surprising about coming back in, as it relates to my current story, is Bankless. Bankless actually helped bring me back, and alongside Bankless was the Daily Gwei by Anthony. Anthony Sassano. He has a very strong podcast in the weeds of Ethereum and the updates here. And when I saw the name Bankless, I remember thinking, oh, like we can go bankless now? Because the phrase in 2014 was bank the unbanked. And I saw this bankless brand. And I think at the time they even had a meme that said unbank the banked. And I remember seeing it and first off thinking like this branding is so strong. Like the red underline and the white text of bankless, I was just like, this feels counterculture. It's like in your face counterculture, but also a very tidied up, well researched brand, like well researched posts as well, like the podcast itself and the written content coming out from both Anthony Sassano and Bankless. I was like, oh, I think it's time now. There are tools now to go bankless. And for quite a while, I actually thought bankless meant like get rid of your checking account. But I was still in it. I was still in for it. I was like, okay, well, if that's possible, I want to learn how to do that nowadays. If that's possible in 2020, but it wasn't in 2014, count me in. So I just started binging the podcast, both podcasts. And at the time there was also Into the Ether, which was a precursor a bit to Anthony Sassalo's Daily Gwei. So there were several podcasts, and I was like, this is how I'll do it. I'll just listen to these podcasts while I work out. And eventually I know that I can become on the bleeding edge because that's how these early technologies work. With 1 or 2 years of work, you can be on the bleeding edge compared to if you go to Web 2, to run an Uber, you can't just learn to do that in a year, but you can be on the bleeding edge of Web 3 almost right away if you just go all in.
Just going back a little bit as well, like when you're looking at cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, and moving to Ether, were you coming that from the lens from a ideological point of view, or from more of a technologist point of view that sort of interested you?
I think initially it was ideological. When I heard that you could have something that can't be inflated away by a government, I was immediately interested. But then as soon as you also say inflation, for someone like me, then I also think about the math side and the technology side. And I was like, well, how could that be possible? How could you not? And that, throws you down the rabbit hole of limited scarcity, of controlled like quantities of things, and how this is the first time we've ever been able to have like an auditable quantity that's not infinite of anything on the internet. Otherwise, you can just copy things forever on the internet. I send you an MP3 and suddenly it could go to the entire world and I would never even know. And that really like nerd sniped me hard. And I was like, oh no, like this is it. This is my niche. I'm ready.
No, also, I mean, I'm a super big fan of the guys at Bankless and all the podcasts that they're sort of doing. I'm sort of came in sort of around the same time, just listened to all the things that they were doing, and just gave me a lot of mental models just to sort of deal with the technical aspects of the space, right? Yeah, it's such a really good start for those sort of that are coming in, and good to know that Dave also is a punk owner as well, to that effect. And then, so what was next for you? So what were you doing at the time? Were you still working full-time jobs, before you sort of dabbled into crypto?
Yeah, so folks who are active in the dev scene will actually recognize this name, Patrick Collins. So Patrick Collins is he was a dev advocate at Chainlink for the longest time. Now runs a really high quality Solidity auditing firm. We're actually working with him at Bankless to audit one of our contracts right now. So Patrick Collins got me into Ethereum. He and I happened to work together when I was consulting at an EOS company. So that's a real throwback for folks who are around in the 2017 bull market. EOS was the biggest ICO, kind of blew off the top of that bull market and called the end of it.
What's going on with those guys now?
I haven't heard anything since I even left the community. That's how quiet that community is. So I don't have any information, but down bad, guaranteed.
They're down bad. Yeah, I do remember that because they were, doing some pretty big things and had some pretty big names behind it and raised a boatload of capital. But yeah, they're sort of gone ghost on us.
It's an important history lesson. I mean, short history lesson. There was a $4 billion ICO, and right away got also sued by the SEC for I think it was for securities, like all kinds of things. And anyway, I was working with Patrick on a project to bring election results from the U.S. election onto Ethereum, because I was the person at the EOS company who was one of the more interested ones in Ethereum. So anyway, I threw around some Solidity, first lines ever to production. Classic is it's kind of how it goes. And in this world, sometimes you just test and prod is a joke. Just go to production with this stuff. So, but when I was working with Patrick, I saw how lit up and excited he was for Chainlink, and I started to learn what Chainlink was, what oracles were, and again, that just nerd sniped me. He was like, I mean, he just asked me really frank. He's like, "Why aren't you working in Ethereum right now?" He's like, "It seems like you would thrive over here, basically like on this side of the world." I was like, "Man, you might be right. You might be right." And it really timed out wild in that right as I was just getting really most interested in Ethereum and ready to move full time, I won an ETH Global Hackathon with Earni-Fi. So Earni-Fi was an original hackathon creation. And the second it won, I went full time. I went full time running it and ran it alone full time for 2 years.
Maybe why don't you share with everybody what Ethify actually is?
Totally. So Earni-Fi is a website you can go to, earni.fi. Earni-Fi lets you see all the things that your wallet can do. Initially, it started with airdrops. We're now actually announcing tomorrow support for tally governance votes. The very next week, Snapshot Labs. We've got a lot more things than just airdrops at this point. But the idea is filter all of the spam out there so that you know what your wallet can do that's valuable. It also includes pull-up tokens. It also includes Galaxy NFTs. Basically anything like Zora allow lists. If it's a valuable mint, Earni-Fi will tell you about it. So I ran Earni-Fi, like I said, for 2 years alone, and then joined Bankless over in November, just now. So 8 months back or 7 months back through an acquisition. So Bankless actually runs Earni-Fi now.
Congratulations on that as well. So I got into Earnify early on and picked up some free airdrops, so which was super useful. I didn't even know I was eligible for some of these things. So yeah, great product for those listening. A little bit of alpha for you if you got a chance. Definitely try it out. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your journey into sort of Bankless, how you connect with those guys there, and how they acquired Earnify.
Yeah, I think the Bankless story has two quick parts. The first one was that I was doing everything as an indie hacker to just hustle, 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 always be posting on Twitter, always be, trying to get in front of the right people, because I had full conviction. This is something everyone needs. You need to know what your wallet can do. You need to know these airdrops. I mean, they're expiring all the time. Like that was it. Like I truly believed in the goodness of the product, still do. And so I would post directly, like Bankless they had a ledger giveaway in early 2021, where if you were a pull-up holder, you could get their ledger. You could get like in a raffle for their ledger. When I saw their tweets, I immediately scrapped together that into Earni-Fi and said, "Hey, everyone, just check yourself on Earni-Fi for it." And really, I think that was the first time it got in front of their eyes. And then actually, what sealed the deal of them being interested directly in a conversation was David found, I think it was something like 6+ wallets with Uniswap, the Uniswap airdrop through Earni-Fi. And that would just seal the deal of like, oh, if David had that and didn't know about it, what about everyone else in the ecosystem? And what about all these things coming after Uniswap? And so the conversation started there and just went really well. I mean, Ryan and David are incredible business operators, incredible communicators. And I couldn't be with anyone else. Like I couldn't want to work, the people I want to work with most in the entire world to this day, even 6 months in.
Amazing. Oh, I'm so happy for you, man. And yeah, they seem like a great bunch of guys to work with. And your role at the moment as CTO, like for BanklessLabs, so what does that involve, and what sorts of things are you guys looking at?
Yeah, so we've got this longer term play happening with Earni-Fi. I mean, the data that's there, as I mentioned, there's this idea that you should know everything your wallet can do. That's really where we're starting with that phrase, that sentence. And with Ryan and David's help, we're looking to bring what Earni-Fi does all over the ecosystem. So right now it lives inside of earni.fi. It's like this weird URL, this weird company name called Earni-Fi. But the data itself is super valuable, and we just need a different way to get that to everyone. And so we'll see that develop over the coming months. But one of the ways you can imagine that is on bankless.com and the folks Bankless works with. Like you can get that data such that you don't miss your airdrops, and not missing something important is really what we want to make sure the whole world can benefit from who's in Web3.
And will you go cross chain, like into other L2s?
Yeah, we definitely hope to. So we're not just ETH Maxis, even though it seems like it. I'm very interested in all L2s. Pretty much anywhere that there's value, we integrate with. And Earni-Fi did support Cosmos for quite a while. For example, we don't want to be just biased towards ETH, but the world is biased towards ETH. 99% of the assets coming out are on mainnet, and the 1% that's not, we integrate with those two. So you can work with Polygon, Optimism, Arbitrum, and several other chains, all searching right away from the homepage of Earni-Fi.
Awesome. Well, looking forward to what you sort of build there. And I've noticed Bankless have revamped the whole front end as well for the subscribers as well. So that's been a pretty good, nice look and feel, and UI, UX is there as well. So I'd like to sort of see what happens next there. Maybe just last sort of question before we move on to your NFT side of the story. But you mentioned whilst you're working at EOS, you still had a deep desire to dabble with the Ethereum sort of world. What was it about Ethereum that did that for you?
Yeah, you can think of Ethereum as, at that time, from our point of view, it's like it was the cool kid. Like you see all these announcements, like this is when Yam Finance is coming out. This is when Meme is coming out. This is when yield farming and food farms just got invented. Like Uniswap V2 is coming out. Like the compound finance launched. And it was like, what? You can yield farm, you can deposit stable coins and get yield. Like all of that was happening over on Ethereum. And I was thinking like, oh well, we should build this over here too. But eventually, like, why copy when you can just be additive? When it already exists, why not just add to it? And so that's what kind of drew me over. And EOS was, like I said, it was on its deathbed, it felt like, as far as transactions didn't always get in. There's state bloat. There's a lot of core issues on EOS that I didn't see getting solved. And I don't think they have been solved since.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, there was a fun DeFi summer back then. I think you mentioned Yam and Meme, and we've had Jordan Lyle on the short show as well. So that was such a great fun story around the meme token that sort of came out. But crazy sort of DeFi summer where gas costs are sort of high, and did sort of feel like all the cool kids hang out on ETH. But more importantly, I think all the cool kids hang out in the punk community as well. So why don't you tell us about your journey into NFTs? What was your first NFT?
I wish I had come in with the preparation of knowing my actual first, but technically, my actual first would have been a POAP token. And so I attended a ETH Global Hackathon, like I said, the one that Earni-Fi won, but several months before. So I had actually several projects that didn't succeed. So, not everything's an overnight success, that's for sure. And I think it was my first ever one there. So it's not on mainnet, but I've got a POAP token from back then.
That's cool. When did you win the hackathon? Like how long ago was that?
Yeah, that was February 2021. It was the night after the Super Bowl, I think.
That would have been in the peak of the bull market, so it would have been quite frantic and frenzy there. And then, what was your journey into CryptoPunks? I think you sort of said that you'd heard about it, basically faded it for a couple of years, and then sort of came back to it. But tell us about your journey to CryptoPunks.
Absolutely. So I remember seeing CryptoPunks on profile photos for months and months, and I'm actually really bad at catching trends. I oftentimes block things out in order to I tell myself it's because I like to be focused. And I tell myself it's because I don't want to be distracted, which maybe that's true. But also, I do miss things. And so I fully missed what punks were. And I saw them on so many profile photos on Twitter. And I was like, why does everyone have these really low res photos? Like, I don't get it at all. And it wasn't until like 6 months in of seeing punks all over Twitter that I had even heard crypto punks. And then by the time that happened, I didn't have a bag the right size to even get a punk. Earni-Fi was just beginning. This was just a time period where I wasn't spending money on things that were, NFTs. For instance, I was paying for food and rent, and so I watched it happen and didn't understand it until it was too expensive for me to not be able to afford it once I understood it. And as it goes, I just watched it climb and climb and climb and then pop. And so when I say pop, I don't mean punk specifically crashing because it actually held up pretty well if you look at the charts, but the bull market itself. So this was the bull market of 2021 and just watching punks go, to the ceiling and ETH price itself going up past 4K. But as it goes in the space, no bull market lasts forever. And I knew that it may be possible one day to afford a punk if I waited for both it to come down and for my bags to get bigger in ETH. So a couple of things really helped towards that. One of them being Earni-Fi, but also I've been a validator on ETH mainnet. I've been a validator since day one, since Genesis. So at the time, it was $15,000 to get 32 ETH, and now that's worth 150K, I think, 120K. Like, it really pays to be fully committed when you do it. And it was actually Patrick Collins that convinced me to run that validator. It was the night of the Genesis of an ETH2, and he and I had been talking about it, and he was like, "Hey, are you going through with it? Do you need help setting it up?" Because he and I were both running our own at-home rig, like talking to each other about it. And I was like, "I don't know, man. I don't think I can pull this trigger." And he was like, asked a couple basic questions to make sure he wasn't encouraging something bad. He was like, do you already have this much ETH somewhere? Can you put it all together? Like, and then as soon as I was like, yeah, I could probably do this, he was like, you have to do this. And I've been running it since Genesis, and probably the best decision out of all of mine so far in Web3.
Nice. And then you used all of that to scramble around and eventually get your punk?
Yeah, so the punk story comes in June as well. I think my 1 year is actually like this week or next week. So my 1 year, it was like the week of FTX collapsing. Was when ETH went down to 800. It tapped 800, and I think I actually cycled in fresh USD for this. So I'm still running that validator I mentioned, but of course it's like different peace of mind now, knowing I have that. And so I put in a decent amount of fresh USD for it, and then yes, picked up the punk at, I think it was 85 ETH, but 85 ETH was at 1,100 at the time, or 1,200 each. So all that to say, it was really a good time, relatively speaking, within the last few years to be jumping in like that. It's up only ever since.
Up only, mate. It's a great pickup and a great time for it as well. I think that's when I picked up this is the current one that I have as well. I think scooped up some cheap ETH around $1,000. Why don't you talk us through a little bit about your selection process? Messy hair, handlebars, and classic shades. Like, what was your curation process like, and how did you end up with 5305?
5305 stuck out to me immediately when I was searching by what you can probably imagine, having spoken to me, Max, which is handlebar mustache. So I have a mustache in real life. And of course, I started with the one attribute I thought I couldn't go without. So I searched both, I think it's like the traditional or short mustache, and then handlebar, both for my punk search, and really just connected most with the handlebar ones. I think handlebars are both silly and cool. And also, it's realistic. So I think, like if it came to the black choker, for instance, attribute, I'm not going to be wearing a black choker every day in life, but I can actually have my handlebar every day in life. And I actually do wear glasses normally. I don't have my glasses on right now because I have contacts, but I really try to just pick something most similar to me, which I think some folks take that route. Some folks take the, most loud or interesting or unique route with their punk. But for me, I was really just looking for something both above the floor, because I wanted to grab something that would also multiply with the cycles, beyond just a floor punk. And then I just got lucky with the shades. I thought the shades looked really sick.
Yeah, he's pretty cool looking dude, and does actually look exactly like you, actually, with the handlebar mustache, right? So congratulations on that. And I'm curious to running the validated nodes. I think Bankless released yesterday a note on staking with I think Lido, and said that basically I think it was too centralized essentially, and they wanted to decentralize some of that. I mean, what's your sort of take and view on some of those sort of remarks?
Absolutely. So when it comes to the media side, that article happened completely outside my purview, and yet I agree 100% with it. That's how aligned I think this community is about decentralization and values. And so, absolutely, I mean, what we're discussing there, what that article is about, is how Lido Finance has a super majority, or has a majority of size of all the validators running, which means they could actually make certain changes that would really impact the network negatively. And so, I really believe in at-home staking. At-home staking, as you can see behind me on video, or if you're on audio, you can imagine. I got this incredible sized computer just for beefing up and running not just mainnet, but running Optimism Arbitrum soon, I hope, so that there's a decentralization thread here where you can run it on your own hardware. Now, we're lucky for that in the ETH community. A lot of folks don't know this, but that's one of the main factors that separates us from Solana, separates from a lot of the other chains out there, is that behind me can run all of Ethereum, and you can point your computer to things locally, and it's all there. There's no trust. So I really think that that is important. And I think beyond that, even once you get to running an at-home node, there's some really interesting stuff there too of which software you choose to run on your personal device. Because if you just run supermajority clients, then it's a lot more of an attack vector. And that's also something that really makes us a strong community. Bitcoin, for example, has only one validating or only one mining software. Bitcoin D, I think is what it's called. And so if there's a bug in that, it's a bug in Bitcoin itself. But with Ethereum, we have a lot of different types of clients you can run. So if one is buggy, or if one is taken over by a bad actor, it's totally fine. Just don't run that one. And Ethereum continues marching on. And you've seen this happen every time we do a massive upgrade. There's an issue maybe in one or two of the clients, but all of Ethereum keeps marching on. Like the merge was just the smoothest thing ever. It was so cool to watch.
Yeah, it was pretty amazing. Mate, that's a bit of a beast of a validator you've got going on in the back there. Is that something that you made yourself, or is that off the shelf?
Yeah, this one in particular is extremely custom, but not custom by me. So I actually got it through MCon, the conference. I met some folks there who build rigs, and this one is as obnoxious as you can imagine. So I'll describe it real quick for folks who can't see this. It is 60 pounds. It is an Alienware Area 51, which is like the largest size Alienware computer they make. Most of it's empty because there's no GPU inside, because you don't need to do any mining. It's just validating. But yeah, it's got really beefed up SSDs. It's got custom painting of the Ethereum logo on it. It's got like neon light up, and it is the worst thing ever to move across the country, which I'm doing next week.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy. I've been using the Avado nodes and the DApp node ones as well, so they're quite easy for non-tech people to basically plug and play, which has been pretty good. So we just need ETH and the whole market to come back now.
I think that's incredible that you're running that at home. I really encourage that. I actually have one of those as well at my feet right now. So that's what I'm actually running it on. This one back here is for a toy for later.
Nice. Well, just going back to, I guess, your punk story. We digressed a little bit, but if money wasn't an issue, what punk would you pick?
I've actually never considered this exact situation because the world is, money is an issue in the world, but I do think I'd probably go based on value. I'd probably look at an alien, but I also don't know if any of the aliens actually like stick out to me in the same way that even my punk does. Like, I mean, the one I have, I'm actually hoping to never sell, which is confusing as an asset to hold. Like every asset you buy should theoretically be something you're willing to sell as well. But I don't know. I think I'd probably stick with 5305.
Nice. Is a clean looking punk. Do you dabble in NFTs much at all, or you're too busy focused on building and developing stuff on ETH?
Yeah, I'm still very into NFTs, probably not in the way that most folks are investing and flipping or even collecting really high value pieces. My punk is my only really high value piece. An example, though, for anyone who's been tracking the last few years, I also have loot. I had a funk for a while. Like I have these countercultural trends or these new idea trends, like the way loot was, which was kind of the idea that it may be the core component of a future gaming metaverse. That's kind of how loot positioned itself at the beginning. And so I followed those trends a bit. I'm looking to pick up a Moonbirds pretty soon, if that community holds up still. I really like what they're doing. I really like the aesthetic of it, pixelated. I think they're pretty adorable looking too. That's one I would be excited to show off or have on a wall. And so when it comes to high value NFTs, it's kind of the lay of the land for me. I don't have Bored Ape and I don't have anything else kind of at this caliber. But I very avidly collect pull-up tokens, Galaxy Oats, pretty much all these NFTs that are based upon activity. So like collecting based upon doing stuff on chain. I don't know if folks have checked out Filand. I think Fi is also a really incredible project of what happens when you take this pixelated world and build it 3D. So it's the designer behind Nouns. It's this thing where you can basically unlock the ability to mint one of these Fi NFTs. It's spelled PHI. And then you can place it on your little world in whatever way you want, and you can visit other people's worlds. And I think that is a really interesting mechanism here. So I kind of don't dabble really in the middle of value with NFTs. I think of either like low value, like honest community, the way POAPs are. POAPs are often free, but you can only get them in person or by doing something, or the other end of the spectrum, like punks, which is a huge like community signal and value signal.
Well said. I'll have to check out Fire. That sounds like an interesting project. But you brought up loot. Loot brings back some fun memories. Would you be able to share a little bit about what loot is for those listening that might have missed it?
Absolutely. So Loot came out 2 years ago as well, probably to the day, just about. It was either June, July, or August, I think, of that summer in 2021. It was launched as just a really unusual project. It was a free mint with almost no warning. It just kind of came out through Twitter. And you've probably seen these. It's just black background with white text. And the white text are these different objects on your character or attributes of your character. So it'll be things like gauntlet, like gold gauntlet, or dragon skin boots, or think about kind of like this Lord of the Rings or RuneScape style objects. And it was the first of that kind of like a raw text NFT. And if you can think for a bit about how, we imagine a metaverse one day where you are your avatar, you are your NFT, perhaps you're a punk running around, you're a Meebits running around. Well, the idea behind Loot got really gravitated to and drawn in by folks in the gaming community and in the metaverse community because it was the first time that an NFT had these attributes all listed directly, which could be read through the smart contract. And that allowed a whole series of these spinoffs. So the derivatives that came out of Loot were unreal really quickly. Developers were able to do rarity searching. There was discords for every single type of rare object your Loot NFT had in it. And so there would be like a cape, like you had to have this certain cape to be in this Discord. And the community was on fire for a bit there. It was for a short flash in the pan. It was like, oh, you need to have one of these if you want to take part in the new metaverse experiences coming out. And I didn't follow the project much after that. I actually did not get one at Genesis. Also, by the way, at Genesis, it went from free mint to I believe the floor was 30 or 40K USD within 3 days. And so again, I watched that pop off, and after it became less cool was when I got in. But it was because I still believe in the values of it. And, similar to my punk story, similar to Ethereum itself, is if you can't be early, just be committed when you do get in.
Yeah. I think now you're talking about it like that. I think it might be a bit of a cultural relic when we look back on it in a few years' time. So I might even go back and pick a few up. And it's got that metaverse angle too. And I think now with Apple Vision Pro coming out, who knows? the old relic type, influential sort of pieces might actually carry some value. Yeah, and it was a super crazy time because there were all the derivative ones, if you remember, that came out in the black of that. So it was Bloot, which I think Beanie was running at the time, which is the green fluorescent green background of the loot sort of play, which which didn't exactly go too well for a few people. But yeah, no, it was a super interesting project. It was good that you sort of mentioned that because that was just a bit of a blast from the past. And are you looking at any other collections? I mean, you mentioned Moonbirds. I mean, are you into art or generative art of that nature at all, or mostly PFPs?
I think I would be interested if I got deeper into any of those communities. So far, I can't think of any of those that have stuck out to me aside from I forgot to mention developer DAO. So Dev DAO, I think the NFT derivative was called Devs for Revolution, but it was a spinoff of Loot actually. But each attribute was a attribute of like a software engineer. So it's as nerdy as you get. It's like handlebar mustache, maybe one of them, but it's also like big framed glasses, MacBook Pro or Linux, like that type of thing. And I stuck to that project as well right away. I wanted to be, like I said, with these projects, I think of it also as a way to get involved in a community I agree with or believe in. So obviously Punks is one of those. And also the DevDAO community is it's a bunch of other nerds like me. So I definitely got interested in that too. But no, I haven't really dabbled enough yet in generative art. I'm curious if you have any suggestions for where to even start.
Oh man, plenty. But definitely start with art blocks and get your head around the chromie squiggles. I mean, they're pretty expensive now, but I think just when you start understanding punks and its impact that it's had, from even from a technical point of view, the random generation, algo, on chain, etc. I think chromie squiggles is probably a really great place to start, and everything sort of stems from that, right? So, and I think Jordan Lyles also dropped a Gen Art platform called Prohibition on Arbitrum as well, using the art blocks tech stack as well. So maybe check those two out. And if you were to look across, I guess, the punk community, do you have a favorite punk that comes to mind?
When you mentioned Jordan, I actually remembered his punk and how he has that purple hat. I think that to me, that's a really interesting one. I mean, the purple hat is a really unique attribute. And besides that, I mean, I don't even remember the number or the name either, but there's the one alien punk owned by, there's a CEO out there. And I just think that alien punks are such a flex that I also think that's super interesting and cool to see because, you see a lot of different punk PFPs, but when you see an alien, you're like, obviously that's a league above on both cost and even if you have the money, like how many of those are even liquid to go buy? So I think alien punks like that, super, super dramatic and interesting.
That's cool. And Dawson, you sound like a man, strong values, the way that you describe Ethereum and all the things that you're sort of doing. How would you describe punk culture for you?
Punk culture to me is people who are here playing long term games. There's this really good quote I like, which is play long term games with long term people. And I don't think you'll ever see someone with a punk who's here for a quick win, at least not within the punk community working with punks. So if you have this and you're not just flipping, like if you have your PFP, maybe you've held it for even a few months, that's already a signal enough. Like you're in it to win. Like this isn't a toy. It's not a game at that point. It's like you really care about something here. And I think the bull bear market cycle actually helps with that more because if you grabbed a punk just for the value, just for the dollars, you probably accidentally found some values along the way.
And how familiar are you with V1 punks? And if you do you have a view on V1 punks?
I actually don't have familiarity, but I'd love to learn. Can you tell me about V1 punks?
Yeah. So basically, when you go back into punk history, and it's you know super fascinating. The original V1 punks were created on, I think, the 13th of June. So everybody was tweeting "Happy Birthday, punks" on the 13th of June. And if you actually go and have a look at OpenSea, it says that the original claim was on the 23rd of June. So you've got a little bit of a gap. So the V1 punks was the original contract that came out from Lava Labs, and they found a bit of a bug in it. where basically it was in the withdrawal function where basically people were buying punks. So basically trading the ETH for a punk, claiming the punk, and then being able to use the withdrawal function also claim back the ETH. So basically, get a free punk. So basically on the 23rd of June, Lava Labs came out and sort of airdropped everybody that had a V1 punk at the time. Basically the V2 punks is what you currently have today. And so I think in 21, they basically came out and wrapped the punk. So came out with a wrapper for the V1 punk and was able to sort of, trade that on OpenSea. And so there's like another community that sort of formulate themselves around the V1 punk, have a bit of a thesis around it. And like you, I wasn't too familiar with the story early on as well, but it just adds to another richness and depth to the punk community. But also at the same time, has caused a bit of angst and a bit of an existential crisis post the Yuga acquisition for V2 punks. So I think that's sort of a high level summary of the V1 punk story.
Wow, I appreciate the background on this. I think that I obviously can't formulate an opinion enough on it, having heard for a few minutes. But to me, I imagine that V1 community is going to have a bit more of a lean towards absolutism, maybe perhaps similar to Bitcoiners. But here I am just hypothesizing, so I'm not going to have any intelligent comments on it. But I think that it's so good that there's these backstories to every community.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's appropriate discourse to keep, the conversation around punks alive, right? Which is always good. Did you have much of a view of the Yuga acquisition of punks at all?
If I'm remembering the timeline right, can you remind me which month that happened last summer?
It would have been early on. I think it would have been like February.
Okay, so then that would have been before I got my punk, which was, I think that I'm not familiar with what they were really doing around the branding previously, but together with Yuga, I believe in Yuga's ability to manage a brand like this. And so I think that was actually part of the point of conviction for me, was the idea that this wouldn't be a project that would die, but it was still a project that is allowed to be itself. There's not a lot of branding still. There's not a lot of marketing push the way that maybe Bored Apes do have. So to see that it was allowed to be its own thing, separate, different style, was really important.
Yeah, I think you're right there. I think Yuga's done a pretty good job so far with handling the sort of punks. And yeah, it was probably a little bit before when you just got in. I think you got yours in summer 22, right? So it would have been like June, July or so. That's cool. But Dawson, this was super fun, man. I guess one last question before we move on. If you could pass on a message to the next owner of Punk 5305, what would you like to say to them?
I think with great power comes great responsibility. Cliche, but honestly, the best things are usually cliche. They're cliche for a reason.
Well said. And mate, this was super fun and really great getting to know you and meet you. A bit of a fanboy on the sidelines of Earni-Fi and Bankless, man. So congratulations again, and looking forward to what you build next. Any final closing comments on your side, and what's the best way for people to find you?
Well, I appreciate the time, Max. It's been awesome to be able to go into really values and discuss, why are we here? Why am I here? And hopefully that inspires others to do things for the right reasons and get in the space even deeper as well. I think only good things can come from being fully dedicated to something that you believe in the ethics of. So if folks want to hear more of this type of political lean towards going hardcore on software, then check me out on Twitter. Dawson Botsford on there. It's Daws.eth. So if you want to just look up my ENS, it's Daws.eth. And yeah, look out for the punk.
Awesome. Thanks again, Dawson. And guys, that wraps up another episode of PunkCast for the week. And we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.